If you're enjoying this podcast from us here at Which, then why not become a Which member? Right now, we've got a special offer, especially for podcast listeners, meaning you can choose any of our 3 membership tiers for 50% off the usual price. Starting at just £39.50 for a full year, you can get Which magazine delivered direct to your door. For the same price, you could also choose a digital Which subscription, giving you access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, and the digital edition of Which magazine. What's more, you'll also be able to use the Ask Which service for personalised one-to-one buying advice. Or why not get a full access Which subscription for just £49.50 for a full year? Don't forget, that's 50% off the usual price. To join Which or to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/podcast offer. That's which.co.uk/podcast offer, or click the link in the description for today's podcast for 50% off a Which annual subscription.
Finding a quiet spot on the continent for a relaxing getaway can be tricky. Unless you listen to this podcast where we tell you about the least visited places in Europe. Hello, it's James Rowe again here in the Which studio to bring you a new episode of Which Shorts. Now, at this time of year, perhaps you're looking for the best summer holiday, or maybe you're ahead of the game and have had something booked for months now. Well, if you're still on the lookout, how about going somewhere quiet for a peaceful time abroad? Well, thanks to Trevor Baker's work in the May-June issue of Which Travel, today we can give you our best recommendations for places with very few tourists, which happen to be some of the least visited places in Europe. Here's Trevor's piece, adapted for the podcast this week, read by Rob Lilly-Jones.
In 2023, almost 12.5 million people descended upon Majorca, an island around a fifth of the size of Wales. Almost 40% of them were there in July and August. Still, we were surprised when our analysis of European Commission tourism numbers found that Majorca is actually the most visited place in Europe. It recorded over 51 million overnight stays by tourists in 2023. More than London, Paris and Rome. The island's population, meanwhile, is just 966,000 people. The European Commission now has a measure for just how overrun places have become with tourists. It calculates how many nights tourists spend in a region compared with the number of residents. Imagine, for example, that 100 tourists spend 5 nights in a town with 100 residents. The tourist pressure figure would be 5 overnight stays to every 1 resident. By this measure, Zakynthos in Greece is the capital of over-tourism. It had almost 150 overnight stays for every person who lives there. The same measure also suggests you should ignore clickbait travel articles that persist in describing Istria in Croatia as the country's best-kept secret. Some secrets, it was second only to Zakynthos, with 133 overnight tourist stays for each resident. For cities, the European Commission's tourist night per square kilometres is a better measure. It records just how many tourists are squeezed into city streets. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Paris has by far the most tourists per square kilometre, followed by Athens and Copenhagen. Many cities and regions have recently introduced tourist taxes and controls on short-term rentals. In Amsterdam, for example, which also appears near the top of the list, you'll pay almost €22 a night on top of the standard hotel rate. So, if you want to avoid places like this, where should you go? Well, if you're after a French city like Paris, you might well be better off going to Lille. The cobbled streets of the medieval town are just as charming, but much less busy. The famous Oisem food market is surrounded by bistros, and it makes it easier to eat well for less than in the capital. Its art museum, the Palais des Beaux-Arts, has the second largest collection of artworks outside the Louvre, including Monet, Picasso, Rubens and Van Dyck. There are around 2 overnight stays for every resident in the Nord region that it administers, compared to around 20 in Paris. If you're local to London, perhaps the best thing is that you can get there on the train in less than 90 minutes from the capital. If you're after a Spanish break, why not try Murcia? It's the least visited part of its Mediterranean coast by overseas visitors. There are around 486 overnight stays per square kilometre, compared to 5,500 in Alicante, the province next door. This is despite the fact that it has two attractive sun-drenched cities, Murcia itself and Cartagena, one of Spain's great centres for Roman ruins. Many of the visitors are concentrated in the narrow strip of La Manga, meaning beaches such as the Four Calas just outside the capital and the protected Car Blanc National Park have been left wild and unspoilt. Sticking with Iberia, the Alentejo region between Lisbon and the Algarve takes up almost a third of the entire country of Portugal, but gets fewer visitors than either. Its headline attraction is Comporta, newly fashionable with its long stretch of beaches sheltered from the road by rolling sand dunes. But if you really want to get away from it all, head to the interior, through the cork oak woods and past hilltop villages in white stone, to some of the country's most impressive towns. Evora is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, with one of the best preserved Roman temples in the whole of the peninsula. In the remote interior, there were just 4 overnight stays for every resident in 2022. If the stretch of coast and mountains of Calabria was anywhere else in Europe, it would be a huge tourist favourite. Because it's in Italy, where there are so many other options, and because it's a region that's historically suffered extreme poverty, not to mention the mafia, it's been overlooked. Even in the most visited village, Tropea, a Mediterranean fancy town of piazzas, narrow lanes and views over the sea, you'll hardly hear English spoken. This is despite being set on top of a cliff above some of Italy's best beaches. Each year this large region, Italy's toe, if you will, gets around 500,000 visitors, but most are Italian. And finally, the least visited place in Europe. If you're determined to visit somewhere with little chance of bumping into British tourists, or any tourists at all, Teleorman in Romania, a 2-hour drive west of the capital Bucharest, is your best bet. There were only 20 overnight stays per 1,000 residents in 2023. It's the least visited place in Europe by this measure. Enjoy mamalinga, cornmeal porridge to you and me, with sour cream in country town Alexandria. Take a stroll along the sandy Brisa Dunari beach, or visit the Valahul Monastery, once ruined, but now inhabited by a new generation of monks. Here you'll find a warm welcome from people who won't be protesting about over-tourism anytime soon.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from Which, the UK's consumer champion. You can find plenty more advice about what we discussed today in the show notes. There you'll also find a link to become a Which member for 50% off the usual price, an offer exclusively available to you, our podcast listeners. Joining Which will not only give you access to all of our product reviews, our app, one-to-one personalised buying advice and every issue of Which magazine across the air, but you'll also be helping us to make life simpler, fairer and safer for everyone. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you're listening, that way you'll be notified whenever we release a new episode of Which Money, Which Shorts or another podcast that we make for you. And if you want to get in touch with us, then follow us on social media, we're at WhitchUK, or you can drop us an email to podcasts@which.co.uk. See you next time.
Every year, Which tests thousands of the products that you rely on every day. And we've been doing it for over 60 years.
Which reviews are 100% impartial. We don't accept freebies from manufacturers and we have no owners, shareholders or government departments to answer to. So our work is on behalf of you, the consumer.
In a world of misleading claims and fake reviews, we test everything, from everyday items to big purchases, so that you don't have to.
We then put them through tests and assessments that go beyond the accepted standard to work out how well these products work for you and what's not worth your money. And a Which membership not only gets you access to our reviews, it also funds our non-profit campaigning work, like getting scam ads banned on social media and ending broadband and mobile mid-contract price hikes. And right now, podcast listeners can become a Which member for 50% off the usual price by heading to which.co.uk/podcast offer.